have something here that I think you guys will enjoy. Turtle Rock Studios, the developers behind Back 4 Blood, did a live stream today on twitch.tv. And in this live stream, the point of it was to address people's questions and concerns about the game, especially regarding the November patch. They talk about things like why they nerfed melee builds, they talk about move speed, they talk about their design philosophy, and they talk about why updates come out in the order that they do. And they also give us some insight on some things that I did not know about that they are currently working on. The two people on the screen include the lead designer on the right here, who goes by the Gentleman Squirrel, and then on the left-hand side, we have a community manager who goes by Burnt Toast. If you want to see the entire uncut live stream, you can go ahead and check it out on their Twitch channel. In front of us here, I took the live stream and I cut it down just a little bit to kind of get rid of some of the filler and just kind of keep it to the main points that they were talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and click play here, and then if there's anything I feel like I want to add, I'll do that while it's playing.
So there has been a lot of discussion over our update. We did want to make sure that we covered a couple of main topics that are pretty hot in the community right now. The first of which I'd like for us to discover is our melee nerfs that happened.
Yeah, so when we were, we play the game quite a bit, and so and we watch a lot of streams, and so we were kind of looking around for builds that might have felt like too dominant, and so melee kind of came up, and so we really dug into it. There were a couple of situations where melee was just, it was sort of a pillar of every build. And it almost made some other builds, feel not as good. And so there's a couple of examples, we watched a couple videos where, Holly players were killing a monstrous brute in like 5 seconds, or you're able to just sit in a doorway and your team isn't even having to shoot or anything, and you're able to just endlessly, kill everything that comes through. So, we wanted to sort of address that to make sure that there's more strategy when using melee. Obviously we want every play style to have some kind of, drawback or soft counter, right? So, but what we found is a lot of the melee players could just sit in the doorway and then just stumble lock everything. So, but with that said, we're always going to be, looking at things and sort of evaluating the game as a whole. And so, I've heard some, complaints that maybe melee and nightmare is not as viable. And, we're just, we're looking into and trying to find the specific situations where, melee is lacking. So one of them might be, there's a, in Nightmare, there's a like 60% stumble resistance for all of the specials. So
yeah.
We might bring that down to help them out a little bit. Yeah. So like one good example is one of the director cards.
One thing that's really interesting about that, and in case you guys didn't know that, each weapon has their own ability to stumble. And that is based off of the damage of the weapon, and then there's also a modifier that runs through that amount of damage, and that will determine how much stumble HP you take off of the creature. And if you make the creature's stumble HP reach 0, then the creature will be stumbled. And part of what was happening is you're just able to stumble lock stuff, especially with things like heavy hitter. And something to note is that on Nightmare mode, which they mentioned here, you can take all that stumble damage you do and then you run it through another thing that just basically cuts it to 60% of what you typically be doing otherwise. So what he's mentioning there is they might adjust that modifier and see how that feels in Nightmare mode.
It's the blighted.
Yeah.
Oh, this is actually a really interesting
yeah.
thing that I had no idea about. So let me rewind this here so you can hear this, because it's pretty important, especially when you were talking about how melee feels in Nightmare.
Yeah, so like one good example is one of the director cards, the blighted.
Yeah, the blighted are pretty rough.
Yeah, the blighted. So we saw, I think, I don't know if it was Discord or Reddit, but we saw that they were doing like initial impact damage when they were exploding. That's not the intent of them. They're just supposed to drop acid on the ground. So they're sort of inadvertently making some of the melee builds harder when you have like a monstrous blighted, and then it's multiplying the damage up, so you're getting hit for quite a bit. So
yeah.
It's like those little pain points that we're trying to find. We also identified another one where the charred commons, when they die, they fall on the ground and then they keep burning you after they're dead, and it's not supposed to happen. So it's like those little, those little things that actually have a pretty big impact on your runs, especially at the higher difficulty.
So that's one thing in my mind that really helps the melee nerfs feel a lot more understandable as well, right? Like I do agree personally that being able to just 1 or 2 shot a tall boy with an axe is kind of silly. So bringing it down so you can't do that quite as much, but then also the fact that they need to fix the blighted and fix the charred ridden is going to do so much for melee players. Like, I had no idea that was even busted, and I feel like most people didn't. So knowing that that's eventually going to get fixed is going to be so nice for melee players. It's just a bug right now.
The intent, though, for tall boys and a lot of the big creatures, is they really know one player without a lot of cards can sort of like stumble lock or take on any challenge in the game.
Yeah, because it's a cooperative
co-op,
effort,
yeah.
right? And we want to make sure that we're not locking players into one particular folder. There should be flexibility with the way that our players are communicating with each other and getting through these chapters and missions.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, we're always going to be looking at cards. We're always going to be looking at difficulties, and we're always going to make adjustments. So if it happens that we went a little too far, we just bring them right back up. So
Yeah.
I think next patch we're probably looking at some cards that are really not getting as much use as we would want. Some cards that maybe don't change your play style as much as we would want them to, just to try to give more diversity in the cards build. So yeah.
So the next thing that we actually do want to address and talk about is our spawning issue. So the special mutations are pretty prevalently spawning throughout across difficulties and such. And during the November patch, we attempted to fix that, and unfortunately we stated that it was 100% fix. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, the spawning system is really complicated for some. The game is very dynamic. You can have a lot of different things being applied and taken away on the fly. That it causes us to sort of have to build it in a way that sometimes the stars will align and you'll get way more than we intend. And so I think the big thing, on live, we might have 50,000 games in an hour or something like that. We can't, we couldn't do
Can't
50,000
replicate that,
games in all of development. So,
I think that's a really important thing that will help people feel more understanding of when things aren't perfect, is these games get really complicated. I can't even begin to understand all of different bells and whistles that make the spawning system work as it does, or really all the other parts of the game, right? And people are like, well, don't they even have a QA team? And yes, they do. They do test their things. But like you said, there is no possible way that they could dish out that many instances of the game of people actually playing it with a dev team. It's just not possible. I'm sure they test this as much as they can, but they're not going to be able to do, like I said, 50,000 games in an hour. They can't do 50,000 games probably, period. So it makes sense when you hear it in that perspective why so many players are able to experience things that they weren't able to catch in-house, because there's just so many more opportunities for something to go wrong. At least that's how I've always looked at it.
Even if just a smaller group of people have, this crazy spawning issue, it really looks like it's super prevalent. So we definitely take all that stuff serious. So we're always, like I said, we're always watching. We're trying to engage with the community to find those bugs, and then we'll jump in and then try to replicate them. So big shout out to some of the Redditors that put up videos for us, because it actually allowed us to look at the situations when they're breaking and then identify more sort of duping, spawning bugs for future patches. So yeah, so we're trying to patch all those holes, and then we'll continue to try to smooth out say Nightmare, and then later Veteran. So yeah, I mean it's a big one for us.
So another thing is to try to talk about our philosophy for card balance and balance changes there.
And so we always want to make sure that there's sufficient challenge to get you to sort of want to engage in the card system. Engage in the card system. You get to try out new things, and so if you meet a challenge, you might go in and change your cards or want to unlock more cards. We usually balance it with is this fun first, right? And then we'll go in and then we'll try to really sort of abuse the fun to the point of where you can't why would I not take this card. And then we, usually we'll try to step them down slowly over time, and then identify cards that again that are not being used or for whatever reason, and sort of bring them up. So we have like 150 cards, so we're always going to be pushing them around. We want players to try to combine the cards to find interesting new play styles. I've seen them actually a lot. I've seen like
it's
laser
pretty
shotgun builds where
crazy,
people are like cycling shotguns and they're basically like slugs and stuff. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff there. So it's going to be continued effort for us to try to get it in a place where sort of as many things are as viable as possible. I think a lot of folks will sort of judge themselves against the Nightmare difficulty, but Nightmare difficulty is maybe it's something that I think we would expect players that have hundreds and hundreds of hours to go into to try to like
those
almost
SWAT
like a
skins are so tasty.
Yeah, so it's kind of like our end game, something that is meaty for players to sort of go in and play. But of course, it's really, really difficult. It's very, very dynamic. So we're always going to be finding things that we're going to be like, oh, that's that's no good. So
and then definitely player feedback again, like on Reddit, on Discord, through our support site. That's going to be really, really important for us moving forward, right? So we once again really appreciate it when players are comfortable and confident enough to like reach out to us and let us know.
Something to note about Nightmare difficulty is on the roadmap there is listed that they're going to be doing another difficulty level. I don't know if that's something higher than Nightmare or what their intention is, but you would assume that's what they mean. So I don't know what's beyond Nightmare, but who knows? We'll see.
So like you kind of touched up on damage and such in like the later difficulties. Can you kind of explain to us about the trauma damage?
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to talk about this, but real quick precursor. I talked about this in the November update video that I did. And there was the trauma bug, and it made it so you're just taking ridiculous trauma damage. They fixed that already. They fixed it with a hot fix. We didn't even have to download an update. But just so you know, that's already fixed. I think they talk about it here.
Yeah, so trauma damage is anytime you take an attack from an NAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some portion of that is gonna eat away at your max health, right?
Overall
so we call
HP
that
bar
so we call that trauma. So on the lower difficulties, just innately there's some like trauma resistance, so you're not going to accumulate it as fast. And obviously when you go into Nightmare, there is no resistances to it, and we actually sort of boost the we actually boost it a little bit, so it becomes more of a factor. So the temporary health thing I think has been maybe a point of confusion. So in previous builds, the temporary health is supposed to negate the damage that it soaks, or sorry, the trauma damage that it soaks, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't supposed to negate all of the spillover damage. So if you get hit for 20, and you have 10 temporary health, it's supposed to soak all that 10, and then you'd get hit for the trauma damage from that 10. And so that wasn't working, which was making temporary health like really, really, really strong.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, so we try to make some fixes to that, but then again, the system's very, very complicated. So we rolled that back, and in the future we'll fix that again, and then
Okay, so for people like, why don't they just roll things back? Well, I guess some things they can and some things they can't. So I guess the trauma damage was one of those things they could roll back. But just to kind of make that clear, from my understanding here, temporary health will block trauma damage as long as it's within the temporary health. So what was happening before is, let's say you only have 3 temporary health and you got hit by a tall boy who's going to try to do 40 damage to you. Well, that 3 temporary health would block all the trauma that would come from that 40 damage. And that was not intended. And if you hear it that way, that does kind of sound like a bug. So what they tried fixing was making it so if you only have 3 temporary health and you get hit for 40, you're still, that remaining 37 that went to your actual health pool is going to be ran through the trauma calculation. But before it wasn't doing that. So that was the broken part of it. And then they tried to fix something, and apparently something else got broken. Either way, they rolled it back, and I guess they're going to take another crack at it later and try to address it the way they want to address it.
Next topic actually is to talk about speedrunning in, I guess, like, it's more prevalently seen in our Nightmare difficulties, right?
Yeah, I think right now it's probably stronger than we would intended. So a lot of the speedrunning cards are more intended to like be like in combat. So if you're speedy, and tall boys bearing down on you, you know, you can subvert its attack by being just faster, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't have any of those combat cards and you're wearing it, like you're using a slow weapon and you're firing, like there's no way that you're gonna sidestep the tall boy like at all, right? So, you know, what we didn't really intend is for the speedrunning to like, you know, almost like lift the veil of the game, so you could go so fast that the, you know, it's nothing is spawning in front of you and stuff, and so we kind of feel like that breaks one of the pillars of the game, which is like, you know, I mean, it's co-op, right?
Yeah.
But we do like speed builds, right? So we don't want to like make that build like
completely non-viable.
Yeah, like you know, that's those cards are there for a reason. They're fun, and so you know, I saw some feedback on in the forums about like, you know, why haven't we addressed speed running, but we addressed melee
builds,
first,
yeah.
you know, and really only in the last couple of weeks. Did speedrunning really become like a really big issue as people figured out how to do it, and so we were already, you know, in cert for that other patch, and there's no changing it at that point. So
Okay, there's two things here I want to address. So if you hear that and you go, what, they had this patch forever ago and they didn't even, what, how does that work? They submitted it forever ago and then finally I got it today. The way this works, and they will talk more about this, is they fix the game in certain ways, right? And they try to put as much as they can into a patch, and then they submit it over to different companies, and they have their certification process. And those companies are going to be something like Sony or Microsoft. And those companies will make sure that whatever they're adding to their game is not going to harm their platform, and that it's going to work on the platform. And then they can go ahead and release the patch on a PlayStation or an Xbox. Now, they can't do anything about it after it's sent through, and that takes a while for Sony and Microsoft to go through the whole certification process. So presumably, while the patch was off to being certified by Sony and Microsoft or whoever, the speedrunning thing became a problem. So they couldn't do anything yet because it was already too late. It was already sent through. So what they're probably doing now is working on fixes for the speed thing that are going to be in the next patch that releases probably in December. And then for the second part here are my thoughts on why speedrunning is so prevalent in Nightmare right now. And in my opinion, the big reason why speedrunning is so common right now is because there's no good reason not to speedrun. There's no incentive to slow play. There's no incentive to taking out mutations or to take out hordes of common. And not only is there no incentive, it uses up a ton of resources and a ton of time to go ahead and try to take out all of these mutations, going through it the slow way and sticking together and going as a group. So my thought is, if you want to have people stick together and play slow and cooperatively, you need to give them a reason. There needs to be an incentive to taking out the mutations. There needs to be, I did this, so I got that. Otherwise, why would players bother? If you're going to be better off speedrunning, then why wouldn't you? And then my big concern is that they're going to go ahead and look at the speed cards and do things to hamper them, make them less effective so that people don't speedrun as well. And I think that could be fine, but there needs to be something that is going to make it so when players are slow playing through Nightmare, or playing normally, however you want to call it, that there's a good reason to do it. And currently there isn't. So they need to make it so that if they change anything about speed, it doesn't feel like a punishment. There needs to be something else that feels good about these changes. A really easy one off the top of my head is go ahead and take that Bounty Hunter card, right? And what that Bounty Hunter card does is every time you kill a mutation, you gain 10 copper. Just throw that card out, delete it, recycle bin, and just make it a standard part of the game. If anybody on your team kills a mutation, just go ahead and have everybody on the team gain, I don't know, 5 copper or something, or whatever they find appropriate for balance. Just anything that makes it so it feels like there's a reason to play slow. If you don't give people a reason, they're just gonna run by it because it just makes more sense. And not to mention, this is a zombie killing game. Make it so that you are rewarded for killing zombies, right? That's how I look at it. If the whole point is to work together and kill zombies, make it so that you get rewarded for working together and killing zombies. And there currently isn't any of that in the game right now. Let's continue here.
So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about today is just kind of our process for getting like updates out to the community, right? And there were a couple of notes on Reddit, on Discord, on Twitter, across all channels kind of asking us like, why were we so quiet? for the period of time in which we were between our update and our first hot fix to kind of work with the issues that did arise. And Brendan, do you want to kind of explain that?
Yeah, so that's just two questions. So, some of that radio silence is actually us working to try to figure out, if anything broke or anything unintended went in, or, the first thing we were looking at was like, was the melee nerfs with a bigger impact than what we thought? And, turns out probably not. And then we started digging into some of the other trauma stuff and we introduced this trauma issue that would really sort of spike the difficulty. So, a lot of that is, we're working, and, there's only a couple of us on, Reddit. So I'm usually on there and I'm in Discords and I'm trying to, suss out.
I can attest to that, by the way. The lead designer here, he's in the Back for Blood Discord and he's checking stuff out and he's talking to people. So if anybody ever feels like they're not trying to stay in touch with the community, you just gotta look and you'll see them everywhere. Like they're definitely paying attention, which I think is awesome. And I think this live stream is a whole example of them paying attention. So I don't know, you can take what you want from that and have it shape your opinion on what they're doing, but I think it's cool. You definitely do not get this out of a lot of different studios. So I think this is a big thumbs up.
Even if I don't comment, I'm trying to suss out what's going on. So even if I don't comment, I'm usually reading through all the comments and I'm like looking at the like a video or trying to figure out what the issue is.
Once we identify a potential issue and begin our investigative process, we also have to push these fixes through like a certification process, right? And since we are cross-play, we do have to make sure that not only for PC but also for console that these fixes work, and that takes some time.
Yeah, depending on the fix, some fixes we can do really quickly.
Like the trauma one.
The trauma one, yeah, and then some we can't. Like you have to have a title update, which has to go through all the big platform owners to make sure that it's good. And so that's a month turnaround regardless, right? So some of that it's a unfortunate side effect of everybody being able to play together, which we like, so being able to have like a bigger community and connect all of the different ways to play is really important, but it has the drawback of slower patches.
You talk about like the ability to cross-play. You can't do cross-play if the game is different on different platforms.
Yeah, slower patches are definitely kind of seen. We also have to be extremely careful with the way that these larger packages go out as well too, right? So through a lot of testing and investigation and having to go have it go through a lot of review and stuff, right? But yeah, that's kind of an additional part of like the development process for getting these things to go live. It's not really you flip the button and it does the thing. But yeah, so those are the main talking points that we wanted to go over today in regards to the November 2021 update. Once again, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out and chat with us. My name is Burnt Toast. I'm also known as Rose. This is
Brandon. Another gentleman squirrel.
You can find us on Discord and on the Reddit as well too. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Take care.
So now if you want to go ahead and see the full stream, it'll be available on their Twitch channel. It's basically the same thing I have here. I kept pretty much all the content. I just kind of made it so that the points they were making were a little bit more concise. But if you want to see the full thing, go ahead and take a look at that. I thought this was cool. I think it's great that they're going ahead and reaching out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, or if you have any suggestions on things that you think would be good to help the game in the future. And, in my opinion, give them a little bit of credit because they're definitely trying. So we do viewer games almost every single night. You can see that link in the description and then also in the top comment. I'd love to see you guys over there. Please consider subscribing if you've liked how I've been covering Back for Blood. And with that, thank you. You guys are the best, and I'll see you in the next video that we do around here.